Welcome to my YouTube channel. This video is going to be a series, and in this first video I will be showing you how to easily achieve the lower part of this beautiful dress. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and if you are a returning subscriber, thank you. Stay blessed. These are the materials I'm going to be using. I have my Ankara print here, and I'm going to use a white doll face for the down part, the ruffle part. This Ankara is already a bit dull, so I need something to lighten it up since I'm having a touch of white, right? I'm having a little touch of white there, so I need something to brighten it up. So I'm going to use this white doll face for the ruffle. Then of course I'm going to also line the skirt, so I'm going to use this black lining, right, for the skirt part. So now the next thing is to do is I'm going to draft my basic skirt pattern, then I'll come back to show you. You should know how to draft your basic skirt pattern, right? So I'm going to do that off camera now and come back to show you how it looks. So I have drafted the pattern and I've also cut it on my fabric. You can see this is the back part. These are my zip allowance, right? I've shaping the buttocks area in order for it to give me that fitness, and these are the side. I draft the pattern without seam allowance, and I've also add my seam allowance to my fabric while I've cutting it on the fabric. Then this is the front, right? I cut it on fold because so I'm going to use this to cut the wrap. So you can see how I've cut it out. So you can go ahead to draft your basic skirt pattern the way you know how to, and place it on your fabric and trace it out. I've also cut my lining alongside with it. This is it. So the lining, I make it 3 inches short, right, to give it the thickness at the down part. So you can see my lining is 3 inches short, so I'm going to put you through why I'm going to sew it, why I leave that 3 inches short. You should even know how to do that already too. So just go ahead and draft your basic skirt pattern and trace it out on your fabric and cut it out. Add your necessary seam allowance, add your dart. So this pattern, I do not add that to the front. I don't usually add that to my skirt pattern, right? I don't usually sew my dart at the front side, but you can still go ahead to sew your dart. There is nothing wrong with that. But I usually add dart to the back side of my skirt, and this is it. I've already also add the dart line too. So please go ahead to draft your skirt pattern and trace it on your fabric and cut it out the way I've done here. I've also cut my lining. Please cut your lining as well and add all your necessary seam allowance. All right, so I'm going to remove this now, then focus on the front part to shape the wrap skirt. So please, when I've done that, I'll come back to show you. All right, so this is my skirt pattern. I've already removed it from my basic skirt. I've already cut that out. So my basic skirt, the front and the back that I showed earlier, I've already cut it out with the lining. So that is separate from the wrap. So this is the wrap now. I'm going to show you how I will achieve the wrap, the one I will place on top, right? I'm going to put my ruffle or fronts on it, right? So what I will do is that this is my pattern and it's folded, and I tell you the reason why I cut it on fold, because I need to cut, because the style is asymmetric, so I need to cut it in a way that the wrap will cover from the both side to the other side, right? So I'm going to open it now. This is it. So while opening it up, this is it. And earlier I mentioned that I've not had any of my seam allowance on it. I've not had the side seam allowance. I've not had the upper part joint seam allowance. So what I want to do now is that I'm going to measure where the hem line is going to end, right? So I'm going to hem my down part skirt. When I'm going to hem it, I'm removing the hem line so that it will now start exactly from the down part of the skirt. So I'm using 3 inches from the hem line, and that 3 inches I cut it 3 inches short of my lining. My lining is shorter from the fabric by 3 inches. So removing that 3 inches, here I have 1.5 inches because the pattern was not enough. So it's shorter than shorter with 1.5 inches. So if you remove that 1.5 inches, I'll be having 4.5 inches, and the half an inch is what I'm going to use to join it. So just go ahead and follow the way you cut your basic skirt, and how many inches, depend on the material you have, how many inches you want to use for your pattern, for the seam allowance. So here I'm going to use 3 inches, and I'm removing the 3 inches from the pattern, and I'm having 1.5 inches. Please ignore this part because I did not show you how I draft my basic skirt, so you might not really understand this part um, trying to explain now, so you will not understand it. So just skip this part, draft your basic skirt the way you understand it, and use the seam allowance that you have. Please, all that seam allowance that you've already add to your basic skirt, remove it. That is, measure it out, because you are going to fold it in at the end of the day. When you finish sewing your skirt, this is what I'm trying to explain. When you finish sewing your skirt at the end of the day, the seam allowance at the down part to hem the skirt is going to go out, right? So let's say we have take it out now, it's no longer here now, right? So this is my complete skirt pattern now. So this is how my skirt is going to be, the length of the skirt, this is how it's going to be, right? So let's go ahead, let's continue. So after removing that, if you notice the side very well, at the side you see that it was joined to the side seam. So, and I want the ruffle to be 7 inches long at the side. So I'm going to measure the 7 inches. This is my 7 inches, right? So my 7 inches stop here. So I've measured the 7 inches, and also I've not add my size seam allowance. I'm going to add 2 inches size seam allowance. Size seam is not inside this pattern yet. So this is my 7 inches, and this is my hip part, right? For my basic skirt, this is my where my hip is, my hip line. This is where it is from the waist to the hip. I have it as 10 inches length. So this is where my 10 inches is. So that is where the style is going to start from. So I'm going to curve this 10 inches hip line. I'll curve it to this 7 inches for my frowns, and where I want it to end. So I'm going to do the curving now. So what I will do is I will turn it this way, then I will start the curving from here. Or another thing again I will do is to make it a bit up. I'm going to measure 1 inches upward from my hip line. I'll go up 1 inches. So from this 1 inches now, I'm going to connect it now. I'll connect it to my 7 inches. Do it in a way that it will show that you are curving it, right? So this is it. I'm connecting it to my 7 inches. So this will be the wrap. So this one is going to go away. I don't know if you understand. Please, if you don't understand, please ask questions. You can comment down. You can drop your comments. So you curve it this way. So I think I'm okay with this curve. So I'm going to cut this place out and use this now, cut it on my pattern. Then you can see what I wrote here. I'm going to add 2 inches. I'm adding 2 inches size seam here because my seam allowance is 2 inches. I'm going to add 2 inches here. I'm adding half an inch here for the upper to join it to the upper part. Then I'm also going to add 2 inches at this side too. So that's for my side seam. So I'm going to do that now and come back to show you. All right, so this is it now. I've already cut out the curve that I had here. So this is going off. So this is what we are going to work with now. This is where I'm going to put my ruffle on, right? So I'm going to cut it on my fabric. All right, so I have cut it on my fabric, right? I've cut it on my Ankara fabric. Then this is the pattern that we have already curved earlier. Then we cut it out and I'll place it on my fabric. Then I just want to correct something. At this other side where the style is coming from, I'm not adding my exact complete seam allowance on this side again. I'm only adding half an inch seam allowance because this other side is where the wrap is going to fall on. It's not going to enter the seam allowance. So that is the reason why instead of the 2 inches seam allowance added on my basic skirt, I'm not adding it. I'm going to add half an inch. So is this half an inch now that I'm going to use to sew my lining to turn it out. So by the time I finish sewing my basic skirt and the seam allowance on it, then it's going to fall on the side so that it will not be crossed over to the other side or have excess, right? So but this other side I have my complete seam allowance on this side because this side I'm going to sew it inside the seam allowance of the skirt, so it's going to go with the seam allowance of the skirt. So let me say it again. This side where I measure 7 inches up, I added 2 inches seam allowance for my skirt. That is the same seam allowance I added on my basic skirt. Then I add half an inch for the upper part to join it to the upper part of the skirt. Then at this other side where I connect it to my hip for the fronts to start from, I added half an inch seam allowance. Then at the down part I also add half an inch seam allowance because I'm going to use lining to turn it. Then I also cut the same fabric, right? This is it. I cut the same fabric for the same with the wrap, so I cut everything the same thing. So I'm going to use the same fabric as my lining for the wrap. So this is it now. Then all our patterns are ready. So this is the pattern for the wrap and this is my skirt pattern that I've cut earlier. So I'm going to go ahead now. I'm going to sew my darts. I will go to the front part. This is the front part. The front does not have darts. I've mentioned that before. So I'm going to use my lining to turn it the way we turn our basic skirt. So I'm going to turn it with my lining, and also for the back part I'm also going to turn it with my lining and also sew my darts. I've already cut out my, so I've already turned it with my lining and I've also sew my dart. This is the front and back side of my skirt, of the basic skirt that I've cut. So I've sewn them now. This is the dart. I've sewn my dart. You can see the dart line. So this for the back, these two for the other side of the back. So these are for the both side of the back, and this is my front. I've also sewed use the lining to turn it out, and these are the down parts of the hemi part, right? You can see how neat it is. I've also sewed this, so I'll keep this aside now. And here is the wrap. So this is the wrap that I've also cut. So what I will do next now is to measure this wrap. Now you can see how it is to measure from here, come down half an inch, then measure from this half an inch straight, measure it following the curve to the end of this place. Let me say it again. Come down half an inch from the waistline at the side where the wrap is going to go. Then come down half an inch, measure that line down to the end of the, measure it more than the seam allowance, down to the hem line where you cut it from, right? So I'm going to measure mine now. I'm going to place my tape rule like this, come down half an inch from there, then measure from here. Now I'm going to follow in the measurement like this, like this, like this, and to the end of my skirt. And here I have 35 inches. So after measuring it, I have 35 inches. So I'm going to times this 35 inches by 3. I will times it by 3 and I will have 105. I think 105. So I will go ahead and cut the width. I'm going to cut my white doll face width of 105 because I have times what I measure from here by 3 and I'm having 105. So I'm going to go ahead now and measure width of 105. Now to get the depth, I will place the wrap on the front of the skirt just as I've done here. You can see how I've placed it. Then I will measure what I have from here to here. Since I've already turned it now, I cannot measure what I have from here to here. So what I have, because I'm going to place the wrap, I'm going to sew it alongside with the seam allowance. right? So and I want it to enter the seam allowance, so I don't want it to above the seam allowance, so it's going to be what I have from here to the hem here. So that's what I'm going to use for all through. So at the depth of the pieces I'm going to cut, so I will measure what I have here now. So this is the ½ inch that I will use and sew the gathers on it, or pleats on it. So I'm going to measure what I have from here now. So it's going to start from here, because since I'm going to remove this ½ inch, so I'm going to measure it from here to here. Here I have 8 inches. So I'm going to cut fabric, another fabric now, width of 105 plus depth of 8 inches, and you add ½ inch to join it here, and 2 inches to hem the down part of your ruffle, right? So I'm going to do that now, and here is the fabric. I've cut it out. Now I have the width of 105 here, right? I have the width of 105, and the depth here I have 8 inches after cutting the 8.5 inches, because I'm add the ½ inch that I'm going to use to sew it here. So by the time I remove this ½ inch here like this to sew the both of them together, then this place will now rhyme with my 8 inches. So then I've also hemmed the down part of the what I'm using here. I've hemmed the down part. So measure yours and cut the width of what you have by the length that you have here. Add the seam allowance that I used to hem the down part. Go ahead to hem the down part, and that's what I have done here. So I've hemmed the down part of it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pleat it. I will leave this seam allowance area, this 2 inches seam allowance I have here. I'm going to leave it, right? Since I've already turned the skirt, the seam allowance that is left here is 1.5, right? So I'm going to leave that 1.5 inches. I will measure my 1.5 inches from here to here, which is the seam allowance. Then I will place this on it and leave the 1.5 inches. Then I will start my pleating from here. So I will go ahead now, pleat it, and face it up. So I'm going to pleat it now, come back to show you. Then I've also cut my band. So here is the band for the skirt. So just measure what you have from this waist, measure the full waist. Then you can measure the full waist, then add about 10 to 20 inches, right? Depending on how long you want it. So here is it. I've measured it. So this is my band for the wrap. So because I'm going to join this skirt to a upper part, I did not do band here for the waist, for the basic skirt. But assuming you are cutting a skirt, assuming you are sewing this, you are not adding it to a upper part, you are not making it a gown, then you can go ahead to do your band for your waist. Then you now cut another band again for your wrap. So because I'm going to add it to the upper part, now I've cut a straight band here. So this band now, I'm going to go ahead now and I cut it at the end of the sewing. Now I want to have 1.5 inches. So here I cut 4 inches by width, because I'm going to use ½ inch to sew it here like this. I'll place it this way, use ½ inch to sew it, then turn it and use ½ inch to hem it on this side. So it will be like this. Now it will be like this. Then I will have 1.5 inches. Then I will continue the sewing all down in order for me to have my band long, so that to have able to tie around my waist, right? So I'm going to sew this. Then I've also cut another fabric again of 4 inches width as well. So I'm going to go ahead now, I'm going to sew it this way. I will sew this one ½ inch, then turn it out. Then I'm having 1.5 inches, folding it into 2. I have 2 inches here. I have 2 inches, right? So by the time I sew it ½ inch, it will remain 1.5 inches. This one is going to go on this side, then this one is going to be on the wrap, while this one is going to be on the skirt. So but when I want to sew it, I'm going to come back to show you. So I'll go ahead now, pleat this on my wrap, then come back to show you. So here I've made my pleat. You can see the pleat. You can pleat it half on half or one on one, depending on how bold you want the pleat to come out. So what I use here is half an inch. So pleat it half on half. I just mark half, then pleat it half on half. Then I'll come down the half an inch here. Right, I'll come down the half an inch. Then I'll place this on it, starting from this half an inch. Then I'll carry the fabric lining that I've cut separate, right? So the same, I cut this the same with the wrap skirt that I've dragged before. So I'll place it on top like this now. So I'm going to sew it, the pleats, arrange the pleats on it to the end of the fabric, right? Arrange it to the end of the fabric here. Then I will place this my lining on it. So I'm going to sew this lining and place it on it like this, and then I will sew it half an inch all the way to the end. I will do that, I'll come back to show you. So here I've already sewn it. You can see where I sew it to the end here. So I've already sewn it now, so I'm going to turn it out. So I'll open it like this and bring it out, then take the lining inside. So here is it, I've already turned it out. This is the back side, right, and this is the front side. So you can see that I use the fabric to turn it, so the wrap now inside will be very neat too. So you can see the sewing, very neat, and see how neat is it. So this is the back side and this is the front side. So this is the fabric that I used to line it. So this is the sewing inside. So I'm going to conceal the sewing now inside. So I've already achieved this wrap now, so you can see how beautiful it is already. So the next thing to do now is to do our dart, to sew to sew the band, right? So this is the band. I've also torn it now. So what I'm going to do, I've torn it out. After I finished sewing it, I've already torn it out. So this is the opening side. So I'm going to place this opening now. I'll place it this way. So I'll arrange these two together like this. Then I'll place it this way. Then I'll sew this half an inch, right? I'll sew it all to the end here, where, see where I stop the sewing here. So that's where this is going to be. So I'll sew it after finish sewing this half an inch. Then I'll flip it to this other side. Then top stitch on it. So it's going to be like this to the end, right? So it's going to be like this now. So I'm going to do that and come back to show you. Here is it, I've already sewed the band on it. So this is the wrap, I've already sewed the band on it, and I extend it to this upper part. This is the gathers that the rough pleats that I've done on it. So this is the complete wrap. So we've already finished with the wrap now. So I place my skirt down, then I place the wrap on top, then I align it, right? So you align it even at this down part. You align it here because this is going to go into the seam allowance. So you align it at the side, right? Make sure that this goes with it. You're sewing this with it. Then align it to at this upper part. This is where this is supposed to be, right? This band is an extra one to cover the waist seam, right? So I've also align it in this place. So what I will do next is I'll now bring out my back. This is the back pattern. This is the back panel, right? So I'll bring out my back now. This is the side. So I'll align this side now. You can see where I mark here and where I mark on this back. So these both have to align here. So I'll align this place too. Align this place, align this place. Then I'll also align this side too. So I'll make sure that this goes with this. So I'm going to go ahead now and sew this place now with my seam allowance, which is 1.5 inches. So I'm going to sew it like this, like this, like this to the end, right, to where this stop. Then I also going to sew this too now. Then on this side I will bring this inside, bring this band to inside. Then I will place this on it like this. Then I'll also check out for where I mark. This is where I mark, and this is where I also mark here too. This is where I mark. So I'm going to make sure that they both align too. So I'll place it like this. I also place this too like this. Then place this too to align too. Then I'm also going to sew from this side too with my seam allowance 1.5 inches all to this place. Then I will fit my zip, right? Then I will leave my slits and the down part here. Then I will fit my zip here. Then that's the end of the skirt. So assuming you are sewing skirt now, you also add your band here and add band on this one. But
just the
I'm going
lower
to
part
join
of the
this with the
dress.
upper
So in my
part
next
of
video, I will
my
be showing you how to
gown,
easily
so that
achieve
it
the
will
upper
complete
part. I'm going
the
to be
full gown.
using
So
a
when I finish
basket
joining to the
neckline.
upper
If you don't
part,
know what a
then
basket
I'll come
neckline
back to
means,
show you the
I'm
final
going
look.
to
Thank you
share
so
it
much for
up
watching.
here.